How are you? I hope all are you good. Welcome back to another class. Today we start English chapter number 6. A devoted son. What do children owe their parents? Before you read, A Devoted Son by Anita Desai is the story of Dr. Rakesh, who was born in a poor village in India, studied medicine in America, and later grew up as the city's richest and most known man back in India. The story portrays Rakesh double standards, a devoted son in appearance, but a cold-blooded, hard-hearted traditionalist on the other. Mamaji Rakesh's father favored his doctor's son more than others, but had a painful old age under Rakesh's professional care for the old widowed man. Read and enjoy. When the result appeared in the morning papers, Rakesh scanned them barefoot and his pajamas at the garden gate, then went up the steps to the veranda where his father sat sipping his morning tea and bowed down to touch his feet. A first division son, his father asked, beaming, reaching for the papers. At the top of the list, Papa, Rakesh murmured as he awaited first in the country. Bedlam broke loose then. The family whooped and danced. The whole day long, visitors filed into the small yellow house at the end of the road to congratulate the parents of this wonderkind, to slap Rakesh on the back and fill the house and garden with the sounds and colors of a festival. There were garlands and halwa party, clothes and gifts in a fountain pens to last years, even a watch or two, nervous and temper and joy. All in a multicolored world of pride and great shining with stars newly opened. Rakesh was the first son in the family to receive an education. So much had been sacrificed in order to send him to school and then medical college, and at last the fruits of their sacrifice had arrived, golden and glorious. To everyone who came to him to say, Mubarak Vermaji, your son has brought you glory, the father said, yes. And do you know what is the first thing he did when he saw the result this morning? He came and touched my feet. He bowed down and touched my feet. This moved many of the women in the crowd so much that they were seen to raise the ends of their saris and dab at their tears, while the men reached out for the betel leaves and sweetmeats that were offered around the trees and shook their heads in wonder and approval of such exemplary filial behavior. One does not often see such behavior in sons anymore. They all agreed, a little enviously perhaps. Leaving the house, some of the women said, sniffing, at least on such an occasion they might have served yogi sweets, and some of the men said, don't you think old Verma was giving himself ease? And it was only the beginning, the first step in a great sweeping ascent to the radiant heights of fame and fortune. The thesis he wrote for his MD brought Rakesh to greater glory, if only in select medical circles. He won a scholarship. He went to the USA, where he pursued his career in the most prestigious of all hospitals and won economic years from his American colleges, which were related to his admiring and glowing family. As for his mother, she gloated chiefly over the strange fact that he had not married in America, had not brought home a foreign wife as all her neighbors had won her reward, for wasn't that what all Indian boys went abroad for? Instead, he agreed almost without argument to marry a girl she had picked out for him in her own village, the daughter of a childhood friend, a plump and uneducated girl, it was true, but so old-fashioned, so placid, so complacent, and that she slipped into the household and settled in like a child, seemingly too lazy and too good-natured to even try and make Rakesh leave home and set up independently as any other girl might have done. What was more, she was pretty, really pretty, in a plump pudding way that only gave way to fast, at soft spreading fat like warm wax after the birth of their first baby son. And then what did it matter? For some years, Rakesh worked in the city hospital, quickly rising to the top of the administrative organization and was made a director before he left to set up his own clinic. He took his parents in his car, a new sky blue Ambassador with a rear window full of stickers in charms revolving on strings to see the clinic when it was built, and the last signboard over the door on which his name was printed in letters of red, with a row of degrees and qualifications to follow it like so many little black slaves of the regime. Thereafter, his fame seemed to grow just a little dimmer, or maybe it was only that everyone in town had grown accustomed to it at last, but it was also the beginning of his fortune, for he now became known to not only as the best but also the richest doctor in town. On the time he set up his clinic, his father had grown into an old man and retired from his post at the kerosene dealer's depot at which he had worked for 40 years, and his mother died soon. Rakesh was not only a devoted son and a miraculously good-natured man who contrived somehow to obey his parents and humor his wife and show concern equally for his children and his patients, but there was actually a brain inside this beautifully polished and formed body of good manners and kind nature, and in between, ministering to his family and playing host to many friends and coaxing them all into feeling happy and grateful and content. He had actually trained his hands as well as emerged an excellent doctor, a really fine such. It was a strange fact, however, that talent and skill displayed for too long ceased to dazzle. It came to pass that the most admiring of all eyes eventually faded and no longer blinked at his glory. Having retired from work and having lost his wife, the old father very quickly went to pieces. As they say, he developed so many complaints and fell ill so frequently, and with such mysterious diseases that even his son could no longer make out when it was something of significance and when it was merely a peevish hymn. He sat huddled on his string bed most of the day and developed an exasperating habit of stretching out suddenly and lying absolutely still, allowing the whole family to fly around him in a flap, wailing and weeping, and then suddenly setting up. Stephen gaunt and spitting but a big gob of Betelgeuse as if it to mock their behavior. Okay, so he did this once too often. There had been a big party in the house, a birthday party for the youngest son, and the celebrations had to be suddenly hushed, covered up, and hustled out of the way when the daughter-in-law discovered or thought she discovered that the old man stretched out from end to end of his string bed had lost his pulse. The party broke up, dissolved, even turned into a band of mourners. When the old man sat up and the distraught daughter-in-law received a gob of red spittle right on them of her organza sari. After that, no one much cared if he sat up cross-legged on his back, hawking and spitting or lay down flat and turned grey as a corpse, except of course for that Pearl among us Pearl's his son Rakesh. It was Rakesh who brought him his morning tea, not in one of the china cups from which the rest of the family drank, but in the old maid's favorite brass tumbler, and sat at the edge of his bed, comfortable and relaxed with the string of his pajamas dangling out from under his fine lawn nightshirt, and discussed or rather read out the morning news to his father. It made no difference to him that his father made no response apart from spitting. It was Rakesh to who, on returning from the clinic in the evening, persuaded the old man to come out of his room as bare and desolate as a sill and take the evening air out in the garden. Beautifully arranging the pillows and blasters on the divan in the corner of the open veranda. On summer night, he saw to it that the servants carried out the old man's bed onto the lawn and himself helped his father down the steps and onto the bed, soothing him and settling him down for a night under the stars. All this way very gratifying for the old man. What was not so gratifying was that he even undertook to supervise his father's diet One day, when the father was really sick, having ordered his daughter-in-law to make him a dish of suji halwa and eat him with a saucer full of cream, Rakesh marched into the room, not with his usual respectful step, but with the confident and rather contemptuous side of the famous doctor, and declared, "No more halwa for you, Papa. We must be sensible at your age. If you must have something sweet, Veena will cook you a little kheer. Okay, so that's like just a little rice and milk, but nothing fried, nothing rich. We can't have this happening again." The old man was astonished at the tone of these words. He opened his eyes, rather, they fell open with shock, and he stared at his own son with disbelief that darkened quickly to reproach. A son who actually refused his father the food he craved. Not it was unheard of. It was incredible, but Rakesh had turned his back to him and was cleaning up the litter of bottles and packets on the medicine shelves and did not notice while Veena slipped silently out of the room with a little smirk that only the old man saw and hated. Halwa was only the first item to be crossed of the old man's die. One delicacy after the other when everything fried to begin with, then everything sweet and eventually everything that the old man enjoyed. The meals that arrived for him on the shining stainless steel tray twice a day were frugal to say the least dry bread, boiled lentils, boiled vegetables, and if there were a bit of chicken or fish that was boiled too, if he called for another helping in a cracked voice that quacked theatrically. Now the old man tried to bribe his grandchildren into buying him sweets, and how he missed his bite now, that generous, indulgent, and illiterate cook, whispering his 50 paise as he stuffed the coins into a tight, hot fist. Run down to the shop at the crossroads and buy me 30 paise worth of jalebis, and you can spend the remaining 20 paise on yourself. Uh, Understand, would you do that? He walked away with it once or twice, but then was found out. The conspirator was scolded by his father and smacked by his mother, and Rakesh came storming into the room, almost tearing his hair as he shouted through compressed lips, "Now, Papa, are you trying to turn my little son into a liar? Quite apart from spoiling your own stomach, you are spoiling him as well. You are encouraging him to lie to his own parents. You should have heard the lies he told his mother when she saw him bringing back those jalebis wrapped up in filthy newspaper. I don't allow anyone in my house to buy sweets in the bazaar. Papa, surely you know that there's cholera in the city, typhoid, gastroenteritis. I see these cases daily in the hospital. How can I allow my own family to run such risks?" The old man sighed and lay down in the cook's position, but that worried no one any longer. There was only one pleasure left in the old man now. His son's early morning visits and readings from the newspaper could no longer be called that, and those were visits from elderly neighbors, old Bhatia next door, however, who was still spry enough to refuse. Adamantly to bath in the tiled bathroom indoors and to insist on carrying out his brass mug and tub in all seasons and usually at impossible hours into the yard and bath noisily under the garden tap, would look over the hatch to see if Burma were out on his veranda and would call to him and talk while we wrap his dhoti about him and dried the sparse hair on his hat. Shivering with enjoyable exaggeration, of course, these conversations boiled across the hedge by two rather deep old men conscious of having their entire households overhearing them were not very satisfactory, but Bhatia occasionally came out of his yard, walked down the bit of road, and came in at Verma's gate to collapse into the stone bit under the temple tree. "At least you have a doctor in the house to look after you," sighed Bhatia, having vividly described his martyrdom to pies. "Look after me," cried Verma, his voice cracking like an ancient clay jar. "He does not even give me enough to eat." And what said Bhatia, the white hairs in his ears preaching doesn't give you enough to eat your own son. My own son, if I ask him for one more piece of bread, he says, "No, Papa, I weighed out the atta myself and I can't allow you to have more than 200 grams of real a day." He weighs the food he gives me, Bhatia, he has scales to weigh it on. That is what is has come to. Never murmur, Bhatia, in disbelief. It is possible, even in this evil age, for a son to refuse his father food. Let me tell you. Varma whispered eagerly. Today the family was having fried fish. I could smell it. I called to my daughter-in-law to bring me a piece. She came to the door and said, "Do." Said no, it was Bhatia's voice that cracked. I drongo shot out of the tree and speed away. No. No, she said no. Rakesh has ordered her to give me nothing fried. No butter, says no oil. No butter, no oil. How does he expect his father to live? Old Varma nodded with melancholy triumph. That is how he treats me after I have brought him up, given him education, made him a great doctor. Great doctor, this is the way great doctors treat their father, said Bhatam. They were cold, comforting, complaining to neighbors, and so such a miserable diet. Varma found himself slipping, weakening, and soon becoming genuinely sick man. Powders and pills and mixtures were not only brought in when dealing with a crisis like an upset stomach, but became a regular part of his diet. Become his diet complaint, Verma supplanting the natural foods he craved. There were pills to regulate his bowel movements, pills to bring down his blood pressures, pills to deal with his arthritis, and eventually pills to keep his heart beating. In between, there were panicky rushes to the hospital. Some humiliating experience with the stomach pump and enema, which left him frightened and helpless. He cried easily, shriveling upon his bed. But if he complained of a pain or even a vague, grey fear in the night, Rakesh would simply open another bottle of pills and force him to take mine. "I have my duty to you, Papa," he said when his father begged to be let off. "Let me be." Varma back, turning his face away from the pills on the outstretched hand. "Let me die. I would be better. I even want to live only to eat your medicines." "Papa, be reasonable. I leave that to you." The father cried with sudden spirit. "Leave me alone. Let me die now. I cannot live like this." Lying all day on his pillows, fed every few hours by his daughter-in-law's own hand, visited by every member of his family, daily, and then he says he does not want to live like this. Rakesh was here to say, laughing to someone outside the door. In the evening that summer, the servant would come into his cell, grip his bed one at each, and carry it out to the veranda. There, sitting it down with a thumb that jarred every tooth in his head. In answer to his voiced complaints, they said the doctor Sahib had told them he must take the evening air, and the evening air they would make him take. Come, Nilvina, that smiling hypocritical pudding in a rustling sari, would appear and pile up the pillows under his head till he was propped up stuck stiffly into a sitting position that made his head swim in and his back ache. "Let me lie down," he begged. "I can sit up any minute." "Try, Papa," Rakesh said. "You can if you try," she said, and drifted away to the other end of the veranda, where her transistor radio vibrated to the lovesick tunes from the cinema that she listened to all day. So there he sat like some stiff corpse, terrified, gazing out on the lawn where his grandson played cricket, in danger of getting one of their hard-spun balls in the eye, and at a gate that opened onto the dusty and rubbish heap land, but still bore proudly a newly touched up signboard that bore his son's name and qualifications, his own name having vanished from the gate long ago. At last the sky blue ambassador arrived. The cricket game broke up in haste. The car drove in smartly, and the doctor, the great doctor, all in white, stepped out. Someone ran up to take his bag from him, others to escort him up the steps. "Will you have tea?" his wife called, turning down the transistor set. "Or a Coca-Cola? Shall I fry you some samosas?" But she did not reply or even glance in her direction. Ever a devoted sign. He went first to the corner where his father sat gazing, stricken at some undefined spot in the dusty yellow air that swung before him. He did not turn his head to look at his son, but he stopped bubbling air with his uncontrolled lips and set his jaw as hard as a sick and very old man would set. Papa, his son said, tenderly sitting down on the edge of the bed and reaching out to press his feet. Old Verma tugged his feet under him out of the way and continued to gaze stubbornly into the yellow air of the summer evening. Papa, I'm home. Verma's hand jerked suddenly in a sharp, derisive movement, but he did not speak. How are you feeling, Papa? Then Verma turned and looked at his son. His face sunk. His face was so out of control and all in pieces that the multitude of expressions that caused it could not make up a whole and convey to the famous man exactly what his father thought of him. He still is up. I'm dying. He croaked, let me die, I tell you. Papa, you are joking. His son smiled at him lovingly. I have brought you a new tonic to make you feel better. You must take it. It will make you feel stronger again. Here it is. Promise me you will take it regularly, Papa. Keep your tonic. I want none. I want none. I won't take any more if of your medicines. None never, said father, and he swept the bottle out of his son's hand with a wave of his own, suddenly grand, suddenly effective. His son jumped for the bottle, was smashed, and thick brown syrup had splashed, upstaining his white trousers. His wife let out a cry and came running. All round the old man was hubbub once again, noise, attention. He gave one push to the pillow at his back and dislodged them so he could sink down on his back, quite flat again. He closed his eyes and pointed his chin at the ceiling like some dire prophet groaning, God is calling me now, let me go. Okay, so dear students, the chapter is in here. I hope you all are very well understand full chapter. We will meet to the next class. Thank you everyone.